Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builders Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the IVES CL12 and the US10. Right off the bat, you'll notice it says Glenn Johnson Invisible Latch BB. This was originally known, or to me at least originally known, as the BB Large. Glenn Johnson had, and they're just branded under the IVES name now, and I think it's because under the Allegion umbrella, who Allegion owns Schlage and Von Duprin and LCN, Glenn Johnson and IVES. Glenn Johnson is really known as a company that has door control hardware, overhead stops, push and pull latches. And I think for marketing purposes, they probably rebranded the AA and the BB invisible touch latches under the IVES name, which is trim and auxiliary hardware. So I figure that's where they likely thought to put it. But I always knew this as the BB Large back in the 90s and certainly before. And the large simply means it's bigger than the AA small. The body size is a little bit taller, okay? Now, this is in US10. This is available in different finishes. And the exposed portion is really going to be what the finish is referring to. US10 satin bronze, US4 satin brass, US26D satin chrome. Maybe the only colors, but we'll check. And then, of course, your plunger is also finished, along with your strike plate. And that's a piece of solid brass right there. I believe the body was always plastic-based, even back 25 years ago. So this is a replacement for the IVES 820. IVES had an 820 touch latch, a metal body unit with a metal strike that you would see in medicine cabinets, and that was done in zinc and a brass tone type color. And I don't know when they discontinued those, but it's been decades to be sure. The CL12 is the larger version. CL12 equals BB by Glenn Johnson. CL11 by IVES equals AA by Glenn Johnson. Just, again, smaller size. And these are very typical and common. A lot of people who will use these when they're building a cabinet, woodworkers will use these, and they work very well. The question we get all the time is, how big of a door can I put these on? Well, IVES doesn't declare that, but I can tell you from actual experience that I have seen these installed on 3080 doors, and I've marveled at the fact that they work because of how large or how heavy of a door that actually is. So there's no guidance from the manufacturer in terms of what to use. When someone says, I want to put this on a full-size door, I'll say, okay, well, the factory doesn't define for us if that's okay, but I can tell you I've seen it, and I've seen that it works. And I always recommend the CL14 auxiliary pusher, which is nothing other than an elegant, item that looks like this, that is spring-loaded, that simply helps you get the action out of the invisible touch latch itself by giving more spring force to the face of the door. They say this requires 27 pounds of pressure to open the door. I don't know what the CL14 will add to that. Let's see if that's defined. The CL14 adds 10 pounds for just the CL14, and we'll show you where those are located, how to find those. That tip is plastic on the pusher, on the auxiliary CL14 pusher. Now, below this video is supporting information in the extended description. There are supporting documents as well. Before we switch to that, let's take a look at the dimensional properties of the unit. 2 1/4 tall, about 1 1/4 inch wide. Thickness of the body, about 9/16. It's completely non-handed. You might install it this way, and if it's going to be for the opposite side door, it'll be installed this way. So this plunger and the receiver for the strike will be either in this orientation or this orientation. Makes no difference on operation. Your strike will physically turn around with that as well. Overall height of the strike, about 1 3/4 inches. Overall width, about 11/16. Overall projection, pushing 5/8. You're going to get a total of 6 screws. 4 long ones for the body. 2 short ones for the strike. Okay. You're going to get a piece of stamped galvanized, white coat galvanized metal. This is very important to have this. let's switch to the screen view and talk about the other very important concepts of this invisible touch latch. So here is the item that we're looking at. CL12. Description: invisible latch. Dimensional properties we've gone over. Invisible latch is ideal for installations where no visible latch is desired. Unit can be installed at the top, bottom, or side of the door. I've even had people install these in drawer fronts as well, and I've been told that it is a successful application, and we'll talk about that more in a moment. Can be mortised to the stop or surface mounted. It's usually surface mounted the way I see it, but if your application permits, meaning you have an overlay installation, which you very likely do anyway if it's woodwork or cabinet, but if it's typical door material, you would not have an overlay, you'd have inset. Let's just define those terms. In a cabinet setting, overlay means that the door overlays the face frame. So the body of your latch is going to be here. That's overlay. Now, if you were to mortise that, your body's going to go here. You're certainly going to need to have an overlay application if you're going to mortise that flush, which would be really nice. I would certainly very much consider doing it that way if I had the option of doing it. In a typical installation, like you would see in a frame, your door is going to sit in here. Obviously, that latch is going to be out here. So, in essence, that's overlay as well, but not in relationship to the frame itself. So, interesting concept on that. Can be mortised or surface mounted. Recommended for use on larger panels or regular sized doors. I wouldn't guess a 3080 door that's going to be 140 pounds, in that range. 3 times, let's see, 3 times 8 divided by, let's say, 6.25. 150 pounds. Yeah, sorry, I did divided. 6 1/4 pounds per square foot is what I was driving at there. Recommended for use on larger panels, full-size doors. Operation is simple. Latching is accomplished by a slight push. Well, 27 pounds. That's not really a slight push. To unlatch the door, a harder push releases the door and pushes the door out. Brass and plastic construction, satin bronze finish. That material itself, that satin bronze finish, is made of brass. Now let's take a look and see what the other colors are that we have this material in. US10 satin bronze, US 2060 satin chrome, US3, I forgot to say that, polished brass, US4 satin brass. Those are your finishes. Now, in the extended description area, there is supporting documentation. So we have the product brochure, an older version of the installation instructions, and then a newer version. The document that is included with the hardware is literally the installation instructions that are over 20 years old at this point. Vis-a-vis, the hardware is not changed. So product brochure first. That's going to show you the CL11, and will give you the idea that it's 1 7/8" high, while our unit's 2 1/4. Okay. The strike will be a little bit smaller as well. Finishes are listed. The CL11, the smaller one, that'd be the AA, if you still know the old terminology. There's your pusher, the CL14, and that would be recommended if you're not getting reliable operation out of the unit. Okay. If you're doing a full-size door, I would buy this immediately, is what I would do. I know people have installed it without, and I can't comment the success of those installations because I don't know. Now, the installation instructions that are not included, the Ingersoll Rand version, let's just study this for a moment. And admittedly, it may cause someone a small amount of pause when they see these installation instructions, because they might just simply be initially a bit off-putting. They give the initial impression, at least to me, that they're a bit more complicated than they need to be. The CL11 dimensional properties are up here. You want to know what the size of the thing is? Look here. The CL12, the same here. That's the CL14. So immediately you can discount, basically half of the page. And the installation instructions are really simply determined wholly by starting with this. This cross-section, which is admittedly a little cleaner on the Glenn Johnson version, which we'll look at, means simply this. You have to place the body of the unit onto the stop or locate it in the jamb that you've mortised it into. Where you place that vertically, I would suggest that you place it somewhere in the center of the door so that you are not installing it in a full-size door up here where, you might have a lot of flex in the door. So you're going to want to put it down here, is what my point is. Somewhere here. So the distance, or the back set perhaps, from the edge of the jamb from the edge of the stop doesn't really matter, because the formula that they're asking you for is basically to say, so what they're saying is the X dimension is going to be your door thickness plus 3/16. Okay, so what you have to maintain, I think what they're referring to is X equals the rabbet, this size here. The rabbet area must be door thickness plus 3/16. That's all that they're saying there. If you don't have that 3/16 margin from the face of the door to the face of the stop, when the door is in the 0 degree or closed position, this latch is not going to work. You have to have that at a minimum. Now, what to me, at least to me, is somewhat confusing is how they show the body as being held back here. It's not it's inferred that it's held back in this isometric drawing at all, but I'm concluding, I'm stating that the proper position of the body is to be flush with the face of the stop, so long as you maintain a 3/16 margin. That's crucial. I've had people install the unit where the 3/16 wasn't observed, and as a result, they're not able to push the door in enough to get it to release. And as a result, they can't get the door open. And as a result, the only way to get that door open is to forcibly pull it open and destroy the hardware in the process. So that is really the entire important aspect of installation. You must achieve that 3/16, and it must be present. Now, if you're installing this into a steel door and frame, you're not going to have 3/16 of an inch. Absolutely not. You'll have far less than that. So be mindful. If you're installing this into a hollow metal door with a typical frame, a hollow metal frame, say with a wood door, you won't have 3/16. It's not going to work correctly. So installation instructions: install latch case. 3/16 clearance between door and stop is necessary to ensure proper operation. So they're literally telling us here, install the latch case, not the strike, but the latch case. This portion, 3/16 between door, install latch case. Clearance between door and stop is necessary to ensure proper operation of latch. So they're just saying, go ahead and install it, and you've got to have 3/16 for that to move. Remove screws from, so what they want you to do is to literally install it to the jamb first. Literally pre-drill your holes and apply it. Once you have that done, literally remove it. Then you install that stamped piece of metal, okay, over the body itself with these prongs that are on the two sides, pointing away from the latch, but also away from the rabbet of the frame, pointing into the opening. Be sure prongs of template point away from latch. So you have your latch body, you have your stop, you have your door, you have your 3/16 margin in here. When you get that, you take the body off. Okay, you're then going to same situation here. The body comes off, and that template goes into the same holes, but those prongs have to point away. The reason for those prongs is that it's going to mark for you the location of the holes for the strike to give you the proper back set. Okay, close the door once the template is applied. Let's back up. You're not removing the lock body. You're only removing the screws. You apply that metal template over the lock body. You don't apply it direct to the jamb. That was incorrect for me to say. It literally goes... Oh. It will go here, and the prongs point away. Okay, and that will give you the proper back set from where it has to enter the latch body. Sorry for turning that around word-wise. So remove the screws from the latch and then attach the lock body. You would only use, there are 3 holes in the template for use, and you'll apply that. You're going to push the door against those prongs and mark the locations. And at that point, they're saying install hook on door. That's your strike. And you just need to, obviously the keeper portion, the strike portion of the hook, forgive me, the door hook or the hook portion of the entire strike assembly needs to be, aligned with the body. The screws will go away or towards the hinge side. Pre-drill those holes, attach that strike, remove the template, use all 4 of your screws to get the latch body secured, and then your installation is complete. Okay, now let's take a look at the Glenn Johnson version and see if there's really any change. I don't believe there is. It's a little cleaner in my opinion. Your dimensional properties here and here. They call that pusher, that CL14, it was an AP2. I had forgotten that part number. Now what they're showing us here, and it's however, there is one quite glaring difference in what's being done here. So if we go back to our IVES template, you can clearly see that template is mounted on top of the CL11 or CL12. It's clearly mounted on top here. Okay. In the Glenn Johnson version, it's clearly not mounted on top there. Okay. They're literally calling this the stop. That's going to indicate, to me at least, that is the wood stop, although I would use a different direction. So they're literally telling you to mark those holes with the template without the latch body, and they even say it. Remove screws from latch and attach metal template as shown for locating screws in figure 2. I don't see a reference to figure 2. Close door gently against prongs, marking holes. Remove the plate. Install the hook on the door. Reinstall the latch case. That's problematic because I believe that they meant to infer that this is your latch body and not the stop. And unless you're going to mortise the unit and the thickness of the unit is the same thickness as your stop, this would be the incorrect way to do this. It would be the correct way to do it if, well, no, you wouldn't have to. It would be fine. Here's what I mean. Let's switch back to the camera view. And admittedly, I've had clients call me and say, I don't understand how to install this. The information seems to be a bit backwards. So we've got our lock body, and we know that the screws will go towards the center of the opening, as would the finished side. So our latch has to be oriented like this, so that the hook is going to enter the recessed keeper area. And I've got that positioned accordingly. Okay? You can see the offset. The strike is hanging out when I've got it placed where it's going to ultimately go. This is against the stop. If I were to remove this and then put this onto the jamb, right onto the stop, where I'm going to mark my holes is going to be way too far over in order to get the strike installed, because I'm not accounting for the thickness of the body, which is going to move it over. But when I install the template over the template marker over the latch body, you can see my prongs, sorry, I'm trying to hold it straight, are going to be exactly where I need them to be. The center of the holes of these locations. So unfortunately, neither document is, in my opinion, is clear, and I can certainly see someone installing this and saying, well, that didn't work. At least the 3/16 is important. The downside that you'll have, I've had people call and say they can't get their door open. Did you observe the 3/16? No, I didn't know I had to. Okay, that's a problem. How do I get the door open? Pull hard, you know? Do you have another way to the back side of that door? The last client that called me maybe 2 years ago could get into that room. They actually climbed over through the suspended ceiling kind of situation and was able to remove it with the screws on the inside. But where to place it is just not clear. The Glenn Johnson version is good if the thickness of, again, if the thickness of this and the thickness of your stop is the same. I would do it that way, and I would then chisel my stop because I've got my holes marked. But I could chisel my stop, install it, put my template over it, and still mark my holes. So, you know, I don't know what to say, but I don't see it. I don't see us being able to conclude that the installation could work any other way than how we've outlined. Center of my keeper, center of my hook is what they're calling it, and those prongs fit right exactly where they need to. I pull this body out and I move that template over, I'm going to be way off the mark. Way off the mark. Regardless. I don't see a reason to switch back to, you know what, let's switch back to the screen view. So, be mindful. Do a reality check. Always when installing material, do a reality check. I will admit that there have been 3 drawings from IVES that I could not initially make sense out of. And there was one of those 3 that were patently incorrect in terms of the dimensional relationship, which IVES was very happy to find, you know, hey, thanks for letting us know it's wrong. And then another of the 3, I had to call the factory and say, I cannot understand. It was where to locate a crash chain is where I had to call the factory to ask. The one where the dimensions were wrong was a template. And this would be the 3rd one in my experience in 30 years, so 1 a decade, that I find doesn't seem to jive with how the installation needs to be. Now, admittedly, I suppose it might be worth it may be worth reviewing it a different way. Let's take a look. I'm doing some... Yeah, okay. So let's switch back to the camera view. Now what I'm reviewing here is the concept of, the drawing clearly refers to the screws being towards the hinge side, so that our relationship is like this. Okay. If I were to remove the latch body, and consider the possibility of turning my strike around, where now my plate is literally against the stop, you can see that I'm not going to be in the proper position at all, because my strike is going to overhang onto the door to the point where this would now be between the face of the door and the face of the stop. This would compromise my 3/16 because of the thickness of this. And it could be the guy, the client who got locked out and had to climb over the ceiling, installed it literally with this on the stop. And he probably realized, okay, well, the only way I can install that hook so that it enters the latch body is to put the screws towards the pull side of the door, the opposite side of the door, and that would have made it so that he couldn't push that in far enough. Anyway, so that's my theory on that. Let's finish up this video moving back to the screen view. So one thing that I find very helpful is to do a reality check on the hardware, especially the first time that you put it together. It's always beneficial when it's the first time that you've installed something to take time and review it and bring to your attention initially, mentally, anything that seems like it's not going to work. So on the IVES installation instructions, door must be able to be pushed in 3/16. Okay. Glenn Johnson showing us a different perspective on where to locate that template. Reinstall the latch case, where in the IVES it never said to remove it. It just said remove the screws, which infers remove the unit, I think, doesn't it? To operate, push back to flush position. To release, push door against stop and release. 3/16 clearance. Be sure prongs of metal template point away in note number 2. Sorry, I think I said figure 2. There is no figure 2, it's note 2. Prongs must go away as we demonstrated earlier. A bill of materials of what's included. Now, the link here, let's back up here now. The item that we're looking at, the link here to the manufacturer's page is awfully handy. And that's because from that page, we're going to allow you to review, as soon as it loads here, not only all of the IVES products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. Other encyclopedic documents are here, such as a technical manual, a master template book, more templates, pivot catalog, manual parts master index. So very neat information on this page. It's the area or the repository of where those encyclopedic documents go. For fun, if you wanted to see what IVES was making in 1896, we have a scanned copy of the 1896 catalog right here. Now, the name IVES was quite synonymous, and still is, with window hardware. And this catalog is almost nothing but hardware as it pertains to Windows. Immediately, there are some mortise bolts here, but you'll get into sash locks. Lots of variations of that material. Very ornate. You'd never see this really today. Sash lifts will come into play later. Finger sash lifts. Flush. Lots of variations of window hardware. Shutter bar. You can still buy a shutter bar from IVES. It's no longer a 3131 though. I don't recall the number of what the shutter bar is. Very neat company IVES is in the sense of its history, in terms of being an American manufacturer of hardware. Let's see, the Template Master Index, talking about the history of IVES and how far back they go. It is more common to see a document from IVES. This is all pretty new stuff. Okay. It is not uncommon to see a document from IVES That is old. 1962. Okay. 1962. That's by no means the oldest I've seen. I've seen one that basically was the end of World War II. 1959. 1970. This stuff hasn't changed. 1976. So, in my experience, it's more common to see these older documents. And I'll tell you, never in an older document have I seen a mathematical error. So, tip of the cap to the older generation. So, all your master templates are here. Let's wrap up this video on camera. Now, I'll beg forgiveness if part of that video review was confusing. Sometimes you don't, really reveal something as being not quite clear and commonsensical until you go through the document a couple of times. I'll certainly update the supporting documentation of the item if a drawing comes to light that is admittedly maybe a little less confusing. But maintaining 3/16 is crucial. I've really never had anyone call me and say, well, I don't understand why my strike is not in the right place. But it is certainly possible, I think, that you can interpret that. I initially interpreted it two different ways, and only after you review it, and the reason I have both of them there, the Glenn Johnson and the IVES version, is because simply they're different. They indicate different information the way it's drawn. If you have any questions on the IVES CL12 touch latch, or the CL11, or the CL14, now they also have a CL21 or CL21A. Yeah, oh, forgive me. It's not. It's a three-way catch, is what that is. Forgive me, it's a four-way catch. Unrelated to a touch latch. Anyway, that link below this video to that manufacturer's product catalog, I would very much recommend that you review their product catalog. The name IVES is certainly not restricted to window hardware anymore. And if you looked at that master template index, you'll notice it all started off with pivots and continuous hinges, aluminum continuous geared, and then pin and barrel hinges. IVES, again, is under the Allegiant umbrella. Her sister companies are Schlage, LCN, Von Duprin, Glenn Johnson, Falcon, Doramatic, Zero, many others that don't relate to the door hardware industry that we're specifically in. They are exceptionally accommodating folks there. Most certainly, I'm speaking about technical support. I don't talk to customer service really much at all, because I don't need a list price and I know what the lead time is. But when I need clarification on a technical matter, their people are exceptional, and that is an absolute truism, what I just said. It's their culture, I believe. They're Schlage, they're LCM, they're Von Duprin, they're IVES. Glenn Johnson I don't talk to often, but what I find is when I speak to a tech support person for one product category, that same person I've spoken to competently in another product group as well. So I thank them for that. They're the reason why you use their products, because they support it very well. Any questions on the CL12 and a US10 finish or any other IVES products, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.